Books and coffee, that's all I need. Lost in a world of fantasy.
Well, first of all, welcome Angie Kim
Hi.
to the Sibs Book Club. Okay, well, the book was very well received by the book club.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Even people that said they wouldn't have picked it up on their own without the book club said that they generally enjoyed it and really appreciated the key themes that people were saying, but that they really appreciated the amount of well thought out, well researched topics that you bring into your into Happiness Balls. Sorry, I've also read Miracle Creek, so
Oh, thank
I'd
you
go
so
there
much
as
for
well.
doing that.
It's the same
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think a lot of people really connected with the realness of the character in terms of like how honest it was. Everything was it wasn't just the upsides or the downsides, it was everything, like, and everything in between. So that was largely what people really appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Thank you,
So
everyone.
yeah.
And I'm so glad that you all read. And I, because it's just there are so many books out there. So I always appreciate that. And I also appreciate, people going, just sort of staying through it, even if some of the stuff isn't resonating with you in the beginning, because I know that's a gift too. So yeah.
It was one thing that I said in the discussion, like I have never actually been in contact with anyone that has autism or Angel syndrome, and
Yeah.
it was quite interesting to me to get to know a little bit more of what it involves and also how it affects the family and everyone around them. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that was one of my favorite parts of writing the book was I did know people like this, of course, even before I started writing, but writing it and researching it really forced me to sort of get into the nitty-gritty and, just talk to so many of the non-speakers and their families and communicate directly with the non-speakers using the spelling methodology. And it brought me so much more in contact with them. And, as a result of that, I now work with non-speakers and teach creative writing to them. And I see them a lot in the audiences and sometimes as my conversation partners in events that I do. And so it's just been such a gift to get to know them and also not just sort of like, talk about how non-speaking doesn't mean that you don't understand, but actually see it, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's fantastic. As a parent of people on the spectrum, and being the wife of someone on the spectrum, I can really, I really connected with sort of the caring role of, that conversation that you have to have in terms of what are the right therapies, what are the right situations, and almost at that point of where is the line between caring and giving your child what they need and deserve to overstepping that boundary of talking for them and not giving them their autonomy. I really connected with that on such a deep level, actually, because of my experience. So it allowed me to process things that I hadn't been able to process. Obviously, as a parent, you make mistakes, as well as you have amazing things happen, and they make you proud every day. But I'm going to try not to get emotional. But yeah, that was really special me, and I think a lot of parents and siblings will also, because I think that's not very often. I think there is more of an effort to have representation for people on the spectrum, for instance, not so much with Angelman syndrome. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Right. It's very rare. It's very, very rare. Yeah.
But I think it's actually even more in fiction, specifically more rare to hear about the family and the dynamics within that and the effects of everyone on each other in that situation. So that was really fantastic, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you so much. And now I can see why why Miracle Creek resonated with you too.
Yeah.
Because that's focused more. I often think of Miracle Creek and Happiness Falls as sort of the flip sides of each other, because Miracle Creek is really, it's examining what it's like to be a parent and to have those extreme parenting sacrifices that you make, that you're kind of forced to make when one of your children or multiple of your children has any type of medical issue, which something that I know very well because I went through that as a parent myself. And also, and then juxtaposing that with other types of parenting sacrifices, like, taking your child halfway across the world for their own good, for their future, and immigrating to a different country. And then on Happiness Falls, looking at the sibling side of that and looking at the child's perspective more, and sort of, and from that perspective, what does that look like and how does that play out? So,
Yeah. So was that an active choice to go at it in Happiness Falls from the siblings' perspective, as that juxtaposed to from a different perspective in Miracle Creek?
Yes, I definitely wanted to focus more on the child's perspective, because that was something that I really, just from the thematic focus of Miracle Creek, I didn't get a chance to do. And I saw some of the people who were saying in Miracle Creek that they wondered why I had done that. And I wanted to sort of like speak out and be like, because I'm working on a whole other book about it, but it already had 7, perspectives. And so I wanted to give justice to that, to the, child's perspective. And I thought at first for Happiness Falls about writing that from, somebody like Eugene's perspective. But, I did think, I'm not a non-speaker myself, even though I had that very temporary and limited experience where I was an immigrant, and so I experienced kind of temporarily what it's like to not be able to speak, if you will, and then, see how much shame and, pain that can lead to, even though it was such a nothing thing for me compared to, obviously, the plight of people like Eugene, where it's a lifelong, disability or medical issue or whatever it is that leads to a complete, assumption by other people that you love and who love you, that maybe you don't have the cognitive wherewithal to be able to communicate. So I haven't experienced that extreme, but just having experienced a little bit as an immigrant myself, I knew how painful that was. I knew that I wanted to tell that story and use the story to interrogate this deep-seated assumption that the society has that equates, non-speaking or lack of oral fluency with lack of intelligence. Like, why do we do that? We do that for so many things: stuttering, accents, anything like that, or even regional accents or anything like that, So I wanted to definitely look at that. And I remember like thinking about, okay, well, if I write this from Eugene's perspective, am I actually doing a disservice to those voices, because I'm not that authentic voice? So would I be better off, from somebody like Mia, who is actually the opposite, right? Because she really does so hyper analytical, and she's so hyperlexic that she really does equate, oral fluency with intelligence. She is one of those people, and she's almost proud of it, in the beginning. And
Yeah.
then for her to go through that realization and have that be a coming of age, not only for her, but for the whole family and for all of the sibling relationships and the family dynamics. I thought that felt more authentic to me as a writer, because I'm not a non-speaker myself. And I, talked about that decision with people, who are sort of my creative writing students who are non-speakers, and they kind of all agreed. They sort of said, we want this story told because our voices are just now emerging and they're not quite fluent yet. So we need people like, you who are allies to tell the world and sort of spread the word about our abilities, so that we will have the opportunity to tell our stories when our voices are fully developed, as we, keep on developing them. So that made sense to me, and it made me feel a little less, icky about, telling the story, which I was worried, like, do I have the right to tell the story, So, um, so I decided to tell it from that perspective, thinking that gives, me sort of more of, it gives me more of a viewpoint that is authentic to me,
Yeah, I think that's, as a reader, that's important to see in fiction.
Yeah.
Just having that level of integrity of, is this true to my experience? Not just, obviously the research is massively important, and it is so obvious in this book that you are very knowledgeable in this area, but and you don't see that all of the time in fiction.
Right.
Beatrice, have you got Rainy's question there?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I also have my question. I might just ask it very quickly.
Otherwise, I'll just ask all of my questions.
Yeah. So my question in the beginning, I did not had finished like the book yet, but I found it very interesting how the book was almost feeling like a retelling of something. Like you were actually Mia was actually retelling something that happened. Was that a stylistic choice? Why did you choose to make like that voice?
I think I mean, in some ways, whenever we're telling a story in the past tense, right? I think it is obviously a retelling from somewhere else. But you're right. I definitely felt that. And I think it came from the first line, which as soon as I wrote it, I was like, this is the first line, we didn't call the police right away. I mean, obviously that is from somebody who's considering the story and kind of like thinking back. And I remember very early on, an editor that I trust, looked at it and said, and asked me the question of, when is she telling the story from? And I said, I don't know. I think she's telling it from, after certainly Eugene has had his breakthrough and she's made the realization of everything that's happened. But I had no idea if that was going to be years from then or days or months, because I hadn't written the story yet. I didn't even know in the beginning what had happened to the father.
Yeah.
So I just knew that there was a lot of regret that she was feeling. You can tell just from that line. She's blaming herself for, the family's decision not to call the police, and that she feels like that's a really important starting point for the story. And so I knew I wanted it to have that kind of almost haunted and also over analytical sort of kind of feel to it. So because that's what people do when they're when they feel guilty, when they feel regret, is they look through every single moment of what they went through, what they did, what they didn't do, what they said, what they didn't say, and then turning it over in their minds like, only I had known what was to come, like I would not have done that. You know what I mean? Like stuff
Yeah.
like that she does a lot. And it just seemed right to me for the story, especially for this character, for her to just go through and sort of justify the way her normal tendency anyway, which is to look through everything so in such detail. And so I felt like it was good from a storytelling perspective to sort of let people know why, you know, she was the way she was, and also like maybe ask for a little bit of forgiveness from the readers as to why she was being so, you know, torturously over analytical, and why she was just like almost going out of her way to kind of be hard on herself. You know, she does a lot of like making fun of her own tendencies, like, yeah, everybody tells me that I'm annoying, you know, that kind of thing. And I think she's hard on herself because she feels that much guilt, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I really saw that come through, especially like you say in the beginning when she's really focusing on having not called the police, like it was solely her responsibility. I think again that's something that we do as humans, isn't it? When we feel about something, it becomes all of our responsibility instead of sharing that load. Which is usually the reality of it. So, yeah, I really connected with that. Okay, so did you have Rainey's question?
Yeah, I have Renee's question here. I am just going to be reading it out of the Discord, so it's easy. So one of our friends in the Discord said that she knows that in the author's note, you mentioned your experience of coming to America, of the language barrier, and feeling like people made fun of you for having a language disability and being unable to express yourself, just like Eugene. How much do you yourself, how much of yourself do you think went into Eugene's character?
Oh, that's such an interesting thing. I think for me, because both Hannah and Mia have that same experience. You know, Mia when she's in Korea, even though John didn't, because John doesn't present as Asian, and also because Hannah had that same experience that I had as immigrants. I think I sort of thought of that more in terms of their experience. And because I guess in a way, to me, I remember the first time I talked to my non-speaking students about this. I told them about what I experienced as an immigrant. And then I said, I hope you guys aren't offended by this, but that's one of the reasons why I became so interested in exploring, you know, your condition and your experience, and in telling that story to the world. Is that okay? And until I got their answer, which was yes, you know, and they said, you know, you're being too hard on yourself. Because I told them, I was like, what I went through is nothing compared to what you guys go through, you know? And they were like, no, you experienced something painful, and we know how painful it is because, you know, they go through it still. And, but until I had that conversation with them, I really did. I didn't want to. I felt like I was almost being a little bit presumptuous by equating what I had gone through with what Eugene and, you know, his people like Eugene go through. And so I think when I was writing, I didn't really think of it as me as Eugene. I thought of it more as me as Hannah and me as Mia. And then as Mia and Hannah, like from their perspectives, trying to think of how Eugene would feel.
Yeah.
But in a way, I almost like felt like it would be, hubris is the wrong word, but something like that, you know, a little bit too presumptuous to like put myself into his shoes, even though I do feel like I get a little tiny bit of the pain that he, you know, goes through. But certainly, like, I did think about if you know, when I was overhearing other people talk about me, you know, basically in front of me, not of them not realizing that I could understand what they were saying, and
Yeah.
how humiliating that had been. So going back through those memories and kind of like forcing myself to sort of relive them. I do this process of writing that I call method writing, kind of like method acting. I used to be in theater, and so I did used to do a lot of method acting. And so like where I really try to put myself into the character's perspective and try to feel what they're feeling, try to make my body, you know, like go through what their body, you know, using similar experiences that I've had to sort of like go through that kind of thing. And so trying to imagine what that must be like, not only from like people that you don't know particularly well in middle school, which is what happened to me, but seeing that happen with people that you love, like your family members, you know, and having them talk about you in front of you all the time, assuming that you just don't understand, you know, in front of each other, in front of your teachers, all that kind of stuff. So going through that and how painful that must be. So I try to imagine as the author me, but as far as the sort of immigrant me, I think I sort of limited myself to thinking of my experience as equivalent to Mia's and Hannah's, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, because I hope that means we can move the more voices we hear in whatever capacity, whether it's fiction, whether it's in politics, whether it's on TV. I think hopefully we can move society forward so that these things, we can start connecting with each other instead of misunderstanding each other all the time, and come from that place of respect and humanness.
Definitely.
Hopefully. I always feel very hopeful when I read books like this, because I think, well, you know, I think sometimes when you are stuck yourself in this frustration of seeing, you know, misrepresentation happening, miscommunication, mistreatment happening of people, and you feel stuck, you feel like it can't ever change. But then I think books like this really help you see that actually it's not just you that feels this way. And there's people, like for me, I'm just a reader, so I don't have necessarily the language skills to be able to communicate these things to other people around me, whereas now I can just say, just read this book. This will help.
And you know, and there's a lot of people, you know, who are like, oh, there's just so much like detail, and it's like it can be didactic or whatever. But I really did feel like for so many of us, it is such a weird concept to think, you know, of these people that we really like assume are cognitively challenged, disabled, you know, in with all the connotations that that word carries. And then, you know, and see them, you know, doing the stims and, you know, making strange noises and all of that sort of stuff. And then be able to type out these beautiful, intelligent, brilliant thoughts that, you know, with vocabulary levels of like, you know, college age people. I mean, the first time that happened to me, I really had to like go through a lot of emotional upheaval within myself to sort of be like, okay, why? I mean, clearly I have all these assumptions that I carry. And I thought that I was pretty not like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think I love when non-speakers actually come with me on to events, or when they stand up during one of my events and like ask a question or comment. Especially the more fluent ones, you know, who can do all the typing and the holding and everything by themselves. I just had that happen like 2 weeks ago, and people were just amazed. It's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to see, you know.
It must be
So
a truly beautiful moment.
Yeah.
it really is. I mean, there are like people who are crying, and it's just, it's such an amazing moment when that happens. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as well, as coming from a place of privilege, obviously, I'm a white person. My first language is English, so most places I go, someone will understand me.
Exactly.
Yeah, so like I think it's fair. It's these stories need to be told and told again, because for coming from this place of privilege, it's easy for me to forget.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it's like you say, you have, you know, you want to be a good person and be fair and treat people with respect and give them their due, etc., etc. But I think it's important to acknowledge the privileges that you have as yourself, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I think that's something that I've learned quite recently, unfortunately. I'm only 42. I'm still young. But yeah, I think I really appreciated like almost that it's having the stories of things that happen in real life, but in that fictional context. It
but just so people know, I mean, this stuff happens all the time. My students, some of them had a really hard time reading the story, and it took them a long time. They had to, you know, stop at certain places because, like, for example, when Eugene is arrested by the police and his actions are misunderstood, and you know, all of that's, and he's handcuffed, all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is stuff that either has happened to them or that they're deathly afraid of happening. So it was actually a little too real for them, they told me. And so it was hard. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. This law that I mentioned in the book, the Virginia law that exempts, you know, that provides, you know, autism as a defense and things like that, that's real. And that was just recently enacted in April of 2020 or something like that. And that was because of all these, too many of these types of things happening. Okay, so I have a question for you. For you guys. I want to know, I mean, I certainly, if there are other questions, I will answer them, but I wanted to know, I always love to know for book groups who have read the book already, what they think about the ending and what actually happened. Did you guys discuss that? And
We
if so,
did.
I want to know what people thought, because I don't know myself, and so I'm always interested to hear what other people think, so that can help me to figure it out too.
Well, there seems to be a clear divide. There's two camps on this.
Really? Okay. Oh, I'm so sad that I missed this.
So one camp is, it's too ambiguous. We need to know. We need a body or something. And then the other camp is, I love the ambiguity. You know?
Okay, but for the people who love the ambiguity, or even for the people who didn't, do they have opinions on what the actual, like what actually happened? Yeah. Did you just
I
know?
think we did not discuss that. No.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
think something that we said was that the impact of the mystery aspect of what happened to the dad, we either would have liked, like in the end when Mia was at the cliff, something to happen that made like the story that Eugene told seem a little bit off, or just
Okay.
like something that might have thrown us off in the end,
Yeah.
or just really like we would like the body to be discovered or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So the I will address that if
Mm.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I first when I was first starting to work on this book, so I started writing, I think the first sentence came to me in June of 2020, even though I'd been thinking about the story and like doing a lot of free writing for years beforehand. And I sold it in December of 2020 based on the first 60 pages and a 3-page pitch letter, which included this. I'll show it to you. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Oh,
So it's this Venn diagram that has
know.
3 circles. One circle says the missing dad arc. The second is the voice fluency, arc. And then the third is the happiness quotient experiments.
Right.
And where they come together in the pitch letter, I had shaded this where they come together and put the ending on that. And so my editor was like, so what is the ending? And I was like, I have no idea what the ending is, but I'm just hopeful that those 3 elements will come together by the ending. But I did say, because I had no idea, because I don't outline beforehand. So I was like, I don't know. I hope that we'll figure out in the next 2 to 3 years. And I did say, though, that one thing that I did know about the ending, or I thought I knew about the ending, was that it would most likely be open-ended in some way. And what I said was, and this is how I justified it. And I said, I'm telling you this now because you need to make sure, because there are some editors, who would be very uncomfortable with that, right? Like your camp of the people who don't want that. And what I said was, missing person cases in real life, 90% of them do not get resolved. The park that's in the book is based on a real park that where I live, called Great Falls Park. And there are a lot of it doesn't have a high waterfall like the one that I described. The falls are more like whitewater, but they're pretty big, but they're not high. But in any case, there are a lot of people who go missing. And a lot of people fall in from kayaking or, hiking. There are cliffs, all that kind of stuff. And their bodies are never discovered because they get trapped in the rocks and the water, and it's too dangerous. So you can't, there aren't ways to get there. So that happens a lot in real life. So that's it. That's something from real life. And then the other thing is just in general, 90% of missing person cases are not solved. And I think to me, that's one of the things that gives them their power is that, and that makes them unique from other types of, tragedies or crimes that happen, which is that, it distinguishes them because you don't know what happened. Nobody out there knows what happened. That's just one of the distinguishing features of, missing person cases. And for the people who are left behind, for the families, that is so agonizing, so much more so, the not knowing is just so much harder for so many people than if you knew and something horrible happened. So that's one of the reasons why I thought, you know what, for somebody like Mia, who needs to know, who is kind of like this type A personality, who's a control freak, who hates ambiguity, who hates open-ended and, books and things like that. and she talks about how much she hates that. It's a journey that she has to go through to like realize that sometimes there are more important things in life than knowing, which is why she has to make the decision on, and she decides to put in the wrong code and delete the whole thing, as infuriating it is for us who wants to know what was on that phone, and for herself. I can tell you, I'm sure that, Mia, like when she's 50, she's still going to be wondering. She's still going to be like, I wonder what's on that phone, like whether it's right, like that was I really wrong to suspect that Eugene maybe, like didn't have that nice, beautiful conversation with dad at the end, that kind of thing. But she needed to go through that, because if she put in the right code, she was jeopardizing the entire future and putting the future into this realm of uncertainty. Whereas by doing what she did, it's true that she won't know what happened in the past, but she is securing the future for her family. And she has to realize that that's like more important for her family. And so that was that. And I kind of likened it to, do you guys know the movie Inception? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Oh no.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, it's so Leo DiCaprio, like he has something happen at the end. That's something that he and the audience wanted to know, like the entire movie, but it's unclear. I'm doing it without spoilers. It's unclear whether that happened in real life or in a dream, like in a dream world. And there's a way that he can tell by spinning this top. And so he spins it, but then he walks away. And Christopher Nolan, the director, has always said, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know the answer. And he was like, I wanted to give the story a resolution for the audience, but I wanted there to be a little bit of an open-endedness as to whether that's real or not. And the pleasure is for the viewers in deciding for themselves which they believe and what they think is more important. And so I loved that. And I wanted to kind of recreate a literary thing, here that's kind of similar to that. So I'm sorry for those of you who are infuriated that, and who wants to know, but just it is sort of mimicking, the real life version of the agony that the families go through. And, and it was necessary for the family to go through that, which is what I wanted to depict. It is a missing person story, but I wanted it to be about how the family copes with that and how the family has to like come together to deal with it, rather than focusing on like what happened to the father, So,
I think that's actually clarified quite a few things in terms of, I love the Venn diagram. It really shows actually, because we were saying like the communication arc sort of like happened, we got that tied up quite well. The happiness quotient, it all came together in a way that was understandable, and if there was just that little bit of ambiguity there with the third. And I mean, I was in the camp that I didn't mind that at all, but it is something that I'll be like Mia, and I'll be thinking when I'm 90, what happened.
Well, I still think that too, and I like change my mind on a daily basis as to what really happened, and for the most part, I think I agree with Mia's chart at the end that says she believes most of what Eugene said, but there are some questions like, did he, because I don't think Eugene himself knows, because a lot of people, when you go through something traumatic like this, your memory is very fuzzy and it's very susceptible to influence. So him hearing that story from Mia and John as they were laying in the, on the couch and all that. I think that he could very well have been dozing off and been half asleep and then overheard that, and that provided some images that overlay on top of his fuzzy memory, So, yeah.
I really I don't know if enjoy is the appropriate word, but that scene where he's describing what was happening.
Yeah.
I was really in that scene with him, like seeing the blue and the white and the like that flash, and I really resonated with that in extreme moments when things happen. Your memory doesn't necessarily remember things. Memory isn't photographic, unfortunately. And I know that from studying psychology as well. I did a module on memory. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that much. That memory isn't a photographic, and I think we often get frustrated because we assume that it should be.
Definitely.
I really enjoyed, for want of a better description, that moment in the book. So is it okay to ask one more question?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Did we have any more in the Discord, Beatriz?
I don't think so, but I have 2 more questions that came to mind. So
sure.
I found it very interesting, and we commented this on the discussion earlier, almost how there was this fantastical moment between John, Mia, and Eugene. Did you think of it from the beginning, or honestly, what was your intention for it to feel as fantastic as it felt?
Yeah. So, the family in the story is actually from a short story that I wrote that was published about 11 years ago. And that story is a magic realism story. And so I think that impulse has always been within me with respect to these characters. When I got to that scene, I knew something was going to happen that night. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but whether they had the same dream or, you know what I mean? Something like this. And I labeled it that section as intermission, or an interlude rather. And my editor, who looked at the first draft, was like, why is that an interlude? And I was like, because it's a departure from everything else. It's kind of like this hazy middle of the night, weird stuff is happening. And he was like, I don't think it's that weird. Nothing mystical necessarily happened, even if it feels like that because of the, of the night and the storm and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to just put it into, the back into the regular structure of the story. But to me, I do think that's something sort of kind of mystical in the same sense that all the twin stuff, that I feel like people accept a lot of that twin weird, things, even if they are both adopted and they, grow up in different families, never knowing each other. They sometimes have the same experiences, that connection people seem to accept. And I thought, you know what? I think that could happen with Eugene as they get closer and closer to him. They've been kind of estranged from him in a way. And as they're understanding him more and more and being close for the first time, I feel like that connection that Mia and John have could sort of go beyond them to Eugene also. And then what was weird was my non-speaking students, after they read this, they were like, how did you know about that? We never told you about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? and they said, yeah, you know what you wrote about, like that connection and the weird thing, how they like were connected and how they knew each other and all that. They were like, that happens to us all the time. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, we just didn't talk about it, like, because they were like apparently trying to decide among themselves if they had like put it into one of their stories or something that they workshopped, and they hadn't. And they said, yeah, you know, it happens with our families and it happens with each other. Like sometimes we can just communicate without even doing this tedious spelling out, you know, that takes a long time to spell stuff out. And they were like, no, that's really for the benefit of other people. Like we can a lot of times like communicate fine. And I was just like, well, that's totally new. And they were like, yeah, we don't talk about it because it sounds strange, but like, and I, so I thought that was like a cool one of those things that you find out afterwards. Yeah. So I love that. And I thought that was really, really cool. Kind of like the whole 100-day thing.
Yeah, that was sorry.
Yeah.
That was my next question, because I am quite actually well, I do love Korean culture a lot.
Yeah.
I love to listen to K-pop, watching
Oh,
K-dramas, that. So I know that the 100 days, it's a big thing in
yeah.
Korea, even
Yes.
in relationships and everything like that. So
Yeah.
when did you figure out that the period uh, in between would be the 100 days? And does it relate with the connotation that it has in Korea, actually?
Yes, it definitely has to do with the 100-day thing. The very first short story I ever wrote, like so I started writing in my 40s. It's being a writer is like my fifth career. That's a whole different thing. But the very first story I ever wrote is called Backward, and it's about a young girl who starts walking backwards after the 100 on based on something that happens on the 100th day after her father dies. And so that 100-day thing is a big, big thing in my family, and, you know, Korean culture in general. It's something that I've just like grown up with. And so, but I didn't know that the 100 days would be basically the epilogue, if you will, or the ending section of the book until I got to that section. I had, you know, the moment when, Shannon leaves, and, you know, and Eugene's been exonerated, and the mom comes back, and they, you know, all end up in an embrace. And I could have ended the story there, and I was kind of tempted to. I was kind of tired, and I was like, yeah, that makes for a lovely ending. But then, like, the idea of, you know, using the 100 days as a way to sort of show the reader a little bit of what happened to the family, which I think provides nice closure, came to me. So it was in the moment of writing. And I thought, okay. And then I thought, okay, well, I have to, you know, figure out when the 100 days is. So I went back to the random day that I had picked in June of 2020, when the father disappeared. The date I had, you know, said when that was. It was like a Tuesday because I wanted it to be right after Father's Day. And so I did that. And then I counted on the 2020 calendar what the 100th day was. And then I wanted to put in some stuff about the moon and the sun and all that kind of stuff. It was some writing that I had done before that I wanted to see if I could use, because I really thought it fit the emotion of the moment. And so I looked up for that date what the moon was doing and how it would look, just so it would be authentic, my description. And it turned out it was the harvest moon. And not only that, but in the first link that I found on what the moon was doing on that day, it was like some weird NASA description. I don't know why. And they talked about how in Korea, this particular day is Chuseok, the Korean Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, what a gift from the writing gods. You know what I mean? Like, and so I was like, well, I have to put that in. And then I looked up like when the sun set and the sun rise and the moon set and the moon rise, all that kind of stuff. And it turned out that in the morning, you know, the moon set and the sunrise would happen near my house in this park, Great Falls Park, within like half an hour of each other. So they would both be in the sun, you know, in the sky together. Like, I just thought that was amazing. And I was like, okay, I'm totally using that, you know? So that was a very, very cool thing. Kind of like, you know, my students telling me that like I got this scene right, even though I didn't mean to. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's cute.
Yeah.
I really, because I told you before, I'm from the UK, and I haven't had the opportunity to really learn very much about Korean culture. These little tidbits are really exciting for me to learn. So
it's really, really cool. I mean, there were so many things like that happen, even like Angelman syndrome. A lot of people ask me like, why Angelman syndrome? And it's because when I was researching the spelling therapy, in real life, so many of the therapists had stuff about Angelman, like we serve people with autism or cerebral palsy and Angelman syndrome. And I was like, what is this Angelman syndrome thing? So I looked it up, and it matched exactly the description that I had of Eugene in the short story that I wrote 11 years prior. You know, the especially the bit about, you know, I mean, there was the motor difficulties and the non-speaking and the stomach issues, the digestive issues, but even more than that, being strangely drawn to water, and especially the persistent smile on the face, because that was something that I had described for Eugene back in the short story. Like Mia says, we called him the happiest baby in the world because he had this big smile on his face, and he was quick to laugh, and he never cried, even when, you know, he had a soiled diaper or when he fell or anything like that. So I just thought, okay, well, he obviously has Angelman syndrome. So, you know, it's one of those things.
Wow. I love hearing about these connections and how you end up pulling it all together, you know. It's fantastic.
Right. It's really, it was so cool when all this came together. So thank you so much for having me again. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to do this during the live show, but hopefully this makes up for it a little bit.
100%. Because you've been able to answer all of our questions. And just lastly, have we got any more books coming out that we need to
yes. So I haven't started really writing yet. I am still in that stage of, you know, kind of settling down after, I just came back from my paperback tour. And so I'm just, you know, just now sort of going through, but I've had an idea that I'm getting more and more excited about that I started researching about maybe 2 years ago. And so it is, I'm not saying what the premise is, what the concept is, but it is very high concept, and it is dystopian / utopian. And it is also linked stories, you know, in the same way that like, you know, like Jennifer Egan's Visit from Goon Squad or Candy House or Olive Kittredge, you know, or How High We Go in the Dark. That is a huge one that I love that I've been rereading. So or Northwoods, all of those. So
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for making time for our little book club, and
Oh, thank
we
you.
very much enjoyed reading your book. So
Oh, thank you so much. And if you do Miracle Creek, I would be happy to come back. And this time we'll get the timing right. But
yeah, thank you
but
for putting up
please, to
with it.
everybody on Discord, I'm sorry I missed the chance to actually get to do this with you in general, but I hope that you get to watch and that this answers some of your questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Grab a cup of joe. Let's dive